So I'm making this recording just to try to educate people on what has taken place so far with the badger culls and to discuss more than anything badger populations and the difference that direct action has made to the badger culls. To begin with, in 2013 we were told that the target population, which was 2,081. Now, we were told that that represented 70% of the badger population. Now, 2,081 badgers to be killed over 256 square kilometres works out at 8.12 badgers per kilometre squared to be killed. Now, that would represent 70% of the population, which would mean that the badger population was being stated as being around 11 and a half, something like that. 11 and a half badgers per kilometre square. Is that an accurate amount of badgers per kilometre square? Well, there was a lot of studies done at the time. There was hare capture, recapture. Those hare traps were then compared to the bodies. So that was believed to be scientifically, at the time, quite accurate. Now, if we go back historically during Krebs, it was typical to see badger population in the 10 to 12 badgers per kilometre square, roughly around there. So when we were told that there was 8 badgers to be killed per kilometre square in Somerset, and then if we go look at Gloucestershire, the target was 2,900 badgers minimum to be killed, and that worked out at 9.32 badgers per kilometre squared. That seemed like the amount that would reflect 70% of the badger population. So what happened then in the first year? Well, what we saw actually happen with regards to the numbers of badgers killed. In Somerset, there was 850 killed. So when you take those 850 killed, and again you divide it by the 250 kilometres squared, it shows that 3.3 badgers per kilometre square were killed. That was way, way below the estimated target of 8.12. And again, in Somerset, it was an even lower figure. There were 708 badgers killed over 311 kilometres squared, which worked out at 2.27 badgers killed per kilometre squared. Now, that 2.27 kilometre per badgers represents, if you're initially saying, well, we're going to kill 9.32, which means there's 12 badgers per square kilometre. When you kill 2.27, it means that you've killed less than 25% of the population. So there was extensions both in Gloucestershire and in Somerset that year, and in those extensions went on for some number of weeks. To try to reach those minimum targets, and in fact Owen Patterson came out and said that the badgers had moved the goalposts. What he was saying there was the population had magically reduced, so that badger population explosion that he'd been talking about clearly hadn't happened. But even then, when they revised the targets down in Gloucestershire, they still revised it down to 1,650, which just there, so that still worked out at 5.3 badgers per kilometre square to be killed, which meant that they were still saying that there were around 7 badgers per kilometre square to be killed. Now, they didn't manage to even reach this revised down figure. And the next time we saw a cull zone being rolled out, it was in 2015. And in 2015, something incredible happened, and that incredible thing was that the minimum target was then 615 badgers per 615 badgers, which represented 70% of the badger population apparently, and that was over an area of 223 kilometres squared. So now the badger population to be killed is 2.75 badgers per kilometre square. Now, when you compare that, go back to Somerset in the first year and Gloucestershire in the first year, you can see that that number has dropped drastically. And interestingly, that 2.75 is kind of halfway between what they managed in Gloucestershire and what they managed in Somerset over a 6-week period. So in Gloucestershire it's 2.27, and in Somerset it was 3.3. And so it looks like they've decided, okay, we don't actually think that we can kill anything like 70% of the population. Instead of trying to kill 7 badgers per square kilometre, which is what you'd expect if there was 10 badgers, they tried to kill 2.75. Now, what they actually managed to achieve was 3.39 badgers per kilometre square. Now, they would have hailed that as a great success at the time. They managed to hit their minimum target. But observers would have, I think, had some question mark as to whether 3.39 badgers per kilometre square actually did represent 70% of the badger population. It's very difficult to be saying there's been a badger population explosion when the population has dropped magically from the Krebs trials of 10 to 12 per square kilometre to now, apparently, in Dorset, only around 4.5, 5 badgers per square kilometre. Now, if we go on into the next year, 2016, you can see that the target number has, interestingly, matched the 3.3 there in the first area in 4. 3.3, it matches the Dorset figure of 3.39. So they've upped what they think is they can manage, 2.75. After a year in Dorset of 3.39, they then up it. They think, oh yes, well, we can actually kill 3.3. So they haven't actually based the targets anymore on what the badger population is. They're just looking at what they can actually achieve. So in Cornwall, they aim for 3.3, and they actually hit 1.8 badgers per kilometre square. So that's an incredibly low percentage of what the expected badger population would be. So they failed to reach their minimum target there. In Area 5, 3.2. They didn't make it. In Devon, they aimed for 3.38 and they managed to get 3.59 badgers per kilometre square again. Devon Area 7, they aimed for 3.3. They actually only got 1.93 badgers per kilometre square, so they failed again. 8 in Dorset. Now this one is the one area where they've started off with a badger population to hit of 3.3 badgers per kilometre square, and they actually hit and killed 7 badgers per kilometre square. Now that is more than double what their minimum target was stated to be, which would suggest that they had absolutely no idea how many badgers there are per kilometre square, and they have only based it on their previous kill targets. Now those 7.2 badgers per kilometre square, 3,000, actually didn't take place over a 6-week period. It took place over a 7-week and 2-day period. And not only that, when you look through the data on the number of free shooters and the number of cage trapping, this area is had one of the highest efforts on the badger cullers side that we've ever seen. So there's a huge number of people going out every night to kill badgers. So if we go down into Area 9 that year, they aimed to get an incredibly low 2.25 badgers per kilometre square, and they managed to kill 2.86. So they managed to have said at that point, oh yes, we've managed to hit our targets quite comfortably. But 2.86 badgers per kilometre square is still a very low number when you consider that we are being told that there's a badger population explosion, and that over a decade ago, nearly 20 years ago, there was 10 badgers per square kilometre. To say that 2.86 badgers per kilometre represents 70% of the population, I don't know how they managed to convince themselves of that. And then in Hereford in 2016, they tried to kill 3 badgers per kilometre square, and they actually only got 2 badgers per kilometre square. Going on into the following year in Cheshire. Now, it was well known that in Cheshire, the people campaigning in Cheshire had been there for quite some time, set surveying for some time, and it wasn't actually that much of a surprise to see the government say that they were going to try and kill 1.92 badgers per kilometre square. It's an incredibly low number of badgers. There's no way that you can say that's 70% of the badger population. If that's 70% of the badger population, then there is only actually 3 badgers per kilometre square, which is there's no way you can ever say there's been an increase in the badger population if it's only 3 per kilometre square when there was 10 or 12 a couple of decades ago. They managed to get 2.5 badgers per kilometre square. Now that's still an incredibly low number, and they couldn't do it in 6 weeks. It took them nearly 7 weeks. Area 12, we see the same thing happening over and over again here. They aim for 4, they get below that. In Devon here, they aim for 3, they get below that. In Devon again, they aim for 3, they get below that. Again, 4, they get below that. 5, and now 5 badgers per kilometre square. That's actually one of the higher. It's the first time they've gone over 5 badgers per kilometre square since that very first cull back in 2013. Why is this so high down in Dorset? Because they've had that success previously the year before in Dorset. So they think, oh yes, well, we'll try much harder in Dorset that year. They didn't manage to get it. They got 3.34 badgers per kilometre square. So they failed again. At 17, they failed again in Somerset. They tried to get 4.6. They didn't manage to get that. In Somerset again, they tried to get 4.4 and they managed to get 2.4, so they failed again. Wiltshire again last year, they tried to get 4.4, they got 3.6 and they failed even though they had an extension. Area 20, 2.92, which is a very low number to try to aim for. They didn't manage to get it, they only got 1.9. And then in Area 21, they aimed for 3.12 and they got 3.7. Now 3.7 is still saying there's only less than 5 badgers per kilometre square. So if we go back through this from last year, how many times have they said that they would try and hit these incredibly low targets, and they've actually managed to hit them? Once, twice, 3 times, 4 times, 5 times, 6 times. They've managed, out of 21 cull zones, they've managed to hit their targets 6 times. And all of those targets have been lowered massively for them to reduce it. So for them to reduce the targets so they're so low that it's almost impossible, and still they don't manage to get them. So this year, what has happened this year? They can't hit these low targets. So this year, interestingly, in every single cull zone, when you look at the size of the minimum number of badgers to be killed and divide it by the size of the zone, you get this magic number of 2.69 badgers per kilometre square. Again and again, slightly different on that one. Again. What they're trying to do this year is to kill a minimum of 15,000 badgers over an area of 5,627. Now I have to stress this 15,000 badgers minimum is only in the new areas. There's obviously a lot of badgers being killed in previous cull zones, and I've tried to focus this just on what's happening in new zones each year so that people can get an understanding of what is it that they're trying to achieve and what is it that we're trying to achieve. What we're trying to achieve is to keep this number of badgers being killed per kilometre square as low as possible. So this year, it may well be, right now, that they're changing their numbers, how many badgers they should kill in each area. These minimum targets, they may be going down, they may even be going up. But what they're trying to do is to say, look, in all of these areas this year, come December, they'll say, or they may even say it in a few weeks' time, we've managed to hit all of our minimum targets. Their minimum target is 2.69 badgers per kilometre square. How does that reflect on a badger population explosion where 20 years ago we were told there were 10 badgers per square kilometre? It should be at least 7 badgers per square kilometre that they should be aiming for. The fact that they are not aiming for 7 badgers per square kilometre, and the fact that they cannot hit 7 badgers per square kilometre, is evidence that their method, combined with our methods of direct action, cannot be effective in killing 70% of the badgers within those cull zones. So whenever you hear someone from the pro-cull side saying, oh yes, we've managed to hit our targets, ask them exactly what those targets represent. How does 2.69 badgers represent 70% of the badger population? Because if that is the population, If that is 70% of the badger population, then there's only about 3.5, 4 badgers per kilometre square. What happened to this badger population explosion that we're always being told about? It just never happened. It either never happened or the culls are failing massively to hit their targets. That's what's happened year on, year out. They cannot hit their targets, so what they've done is they've reduced their targets to make them look like they're effective. They aren't.